So if you're looking for something that you can do that kind of gives you like a monthly recurring revenue, or something a bit more predictable, stable, that you can fit in around maybe some of the bigger or more unpredictable types of projects, this is it. It's going to be a lot more appealing for some of you than others. It might be something that you initially really enjoy, and then over time you realize it's not really your thing, or you might love them and you might just do them forever. So be open to whichever one it is, because I think in the beginning it never hurts to try something if you're not sure, and then once you've done it a couple of times, you have a pretty good sense of whether it's good for you or not. So ad board reports are reports that are written after an advisory board meeting, and it's a formal document that helps pharmaceutical executives sell their products, which are drugs. So basically, you just have a room full of experts. Usually it's some form of physician or some specialist healthcare professional. So it could be respirologists or dermatologists or oncologists, or people who specialize in like a certain type of mental health. And it's usually people from all over the country. So you'll have like one or two from, like if it's a Canadian one, for example, you have some from Quebec, some from Toronto, some from Vancouver, and they'll sort of fly people in because they want to be in a room of the best people in that field at that point in time. So they tend to happen annually because they want to assess what is changing from one year to the next. And again, those experts might be the same people who keep coming back. They might be slightly different people depending on, because clinicians can move into different specialties and work their way up and retire and stuff like that. So it's usually about, I would say, 6 to 12 experts who they gather in this room, and the pharma company pays for their travel, they pay for their food, they put them up at a hotel. It used to be a lot more like injecting money into it to make them come, but then during the pandemic they had to do them all remotely, and there wasn't as much of an incentive there, but they would still pay them. They pay them to participate, so there's an incentive there for them to be helpful. The meetings themselves can run from usually about 4 hours up to 8 hours in a day. I've never personally seen one that has spanned more than one day. They're usually like really full days. So obviously there'll be some breaks and like food and drinks and stuff, but they're pretty long days, even the 4-hour ones, because they cover a lot of stuff. And so the ideal situation is that you're actually physically sitting in the meeting while it's taking place. You're recording the audio of the session. You're taking notes, usually by typing because it happens so quickly. And you are trying to document important stuff that happens in the meeting. Because when you write the report, it's going to go to the pharma executives and it's going to help them figure out like what to do with their drug portfolio and who they should be marketing them to, or demoing them to, or whatever the equivalent of a demo is, like giving them samples and kind of going in and talking about the products and presenting data and stuff to the physicians. So you write most of the report after the meeting actually happens, because there's no way that you can do it to a high standard while it's happening. But what is so helpful to be there in person, because in the breaks, you could technically walk up to somebody and say, can you just clarify what you said earlier? Or it's quite difficult to do that, but if you really need to, you can. And you can also talk to the pharma company directly, because there'll be some representatives there who are facilitating the meeting, who you can say, I just want to clarify this or that. But the client sort of assumes that you know how to handle it, and as the writer, you kind of just sit there and act invisibly. Like you will introduce yourself at the beginning of the meeting when everyone else does, so that they're not wondering like who that random person is in the room. But you sort of, after you introduce yourself, you kind of you're a fly on the wall, and usually there's not any participation that you have to make. You're literally just there to document what is happening. When you are in the room, a really good thing to do before the meeting actually starts is to go around and kind of draw a little map on a piece of paper of like who's sitting where, and try to come up with like a shorthand version of their name or some way of remembering their name, because when everybody's speaking, it's really difficult sometimes to attribute who's saying what, and you cannot misattribute what people are saying because that would be really bad. So what I usually do is I try to do like Dr. M or Dr. Z or whatever. And sometimes they have the same name, so I might go with like first name or something just for my own reference. And I might even write out the names in like a note or something on my computer so I can easily kind of copy and paste them in when they start to speak. So you got to come up with like your own system in terms of efficiency of how to get stuff down as best you can. Because even though you'll have the recording, and you should always be recording, you want to write as much as you can while it's happening, because it helps you remember and it helps you kind of compartmentalize and follow the discussion as well. Okay, so these are the two main scenarios that will be surrounding any advisory board meeting. Like I said, I've done a lot of these and I have never really seen anything outside of these two. There is a third one, but it's so uncommon. I may mention it, but for the purposes of today, these are what we're going to focus on. So you either have a situation where the pharma company wants to know what the current prescribing habits are. So they want to know, is this product that we make being prescribed or not? And if it isn't, why? And if it is, why? You know, they really want to understand what the prescribing habits are of the experts, because the experts are not only working with the largest number of these patients who the drug is indicated for, but they're also training everybody underneath them, and they are influencing the practices of the hospitals, and they are, you know, influencing where the funding is going and things like that. So these are like the prime people who are using the products and influencing everybody who's using the products, and also convincing the patients to take the product. So that is a really common reason why the meeting is happening. And sometimes it may be a combination of one and two, but usually it's more one than the other. And the second reason why this meeting is happening is because a drug that they have in their repertoire has been involved in some preliminary trials and things, and they've found that there's some incidental therapeutic benefit in a different area of medicine to what they initially planned it to have, which is sort of like, ooh, maybe this is really good for depression and it's not just for diabetes or something like that, you know? And so often the clinicians are the first people to catch on to this, because they have patients who have been using things they're not supposed to be using, or experimenting, or thinking outside the box, or managing to get hold of things they shouldn't have. And then they hear this anecdotal evidence that, oh, this thing actually works over here as well. And it's quite risky, obviously, in the beginning, and it's not in any of the guidelines or any of the recommendations as to what the clinicians should be recommending or what the patients should be doing. But that doesn't mean that it won't be in the future. So they're trying to get ahead of the curve by thinking, okay, let's talk to these people who are actually using it in a strange way and see if they're getting benefits, and like why they're going, like why they're skirting the parameters of what is legal or what is appropriate, because there must be a benefit to the patients if they're doing that. And at these meetings, they can talk openly about all the stuff they're doing, and for some reason there are no legal implications. I guess they just keep everything confidential, and you know, they're allowed to do that. I'm not sure about the legal stuff specifically, but I do know that they go into all the real things that are happening behind the scenes, and there's a lot of off-label stuff that is going on. So the questions they'll ask are things around, you know, should we make this a new indication? Should we do research in this area? If we did do this, what would it look like? How would it work? How would it affect your workflow? If you don't think we should do this, why don't you think we should do this? And that kind of thing. So those are the main objectives that the pharma company has, and that's the reason why they're funding the meeting. So in terms of things to include, And again, we're going to always be referring back to these two scenarios because we've got to keep the objectives in mind. You can use that to figure out what to include in the report and what not to. So usually they fall under these couple of categories. Either stuff relating to prescribing habits, like why are they picking one drug over another, or what's preventing them from picking the drug that this company has, because of course they will mention the competitive products a lot during the conversation because they have options usually. And that's where the landscape is very competitive because, why should they pick one drug over another? The pharma companies really want to have a good understanding of what the prescribing habits are, because maybe they can influence that in their marketing or in the materials or in the way that they package the product or the types of ongoing studies that they're doing. And then the second part of it is, around the new indication. What do you think about this? Why aren't you on board with this kind of thing? What would we need to do in order to bridge this gap and that kind of thing? So anytime that these things are being discussed by the experts in the room, it needs to be captured in the report, because this is like the gold. This is why the meeting is happening.